I'm standing in a crowded room. The air is thick with the buzz of conversations, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter of people desperate to impress one another. My heart pounds a frantic rhythm against my ribs, not from excitement, but from a quiet, gnawing dread. I see him across the room. He's not the loudest man. He isn't the one telling the most animated story, or holding court in the center of the circle. No. He's standing in the periphery, a silent sentinel. And it's that silence that makes him terrifying. He's watching. His gaze is still, unblinking. He offers no smiles, no nervous fidgeting, no desperate attempt to join a conversation. He simply exists, a monument of stillness in a sea of motion. Everyone around him seems to shrink, to falter. They look at him and feel a primal, unsettling fear. The fear of something they cannot read, something they cannot grasp. I've been told my whole life that power is loud, that it's a shout, a command, a demand for attention. But what if that's a lie? What if the real power, the kind that makes the knees of even the most arrogant men tremble, is quiet? What if it's not the roar of a lion, but the unnerving, predatory stillness of a shark in the water? The kind of stillness that tells you it has already made its decision. The kind of silence that doesn't beg to be heard, but demands to be felt. It's not about caring less. It's about caring so selectively that you become a ghost in the machine. A figure who doesn't flinch, doesn't react, doesn't even seem to notice the very chaos others are drowning in. They see you, and a question forms in their mind. One that echoes in the darkest parts of their subconscious. Why doesn't he care? And that question, that doubt, that seed of insecurity they feel, is the beginning of your victory. The world wants you to be a puppet on its stage. It pulls your strings with every social media notification, every news headline, every slight, every rumor. It wants you to dance for its amusement. It wants a reaction. A flinch, a moment of panic it can exploit. But the man I'm watching, he's not dancing. He's not even watching the stage. He's simply there. And it makes everyone else's performance feel desperate, pathetic, small. The air around him feels different. It's heavy, with an unshakable confidence that has nothing to prove. His eyes hold a silent, knowing calm. He's not aloof. He's not apathetic. He's something far more dangerous. He's completely, utterly, unshakably in control. And that control doesn't come from his surroundings. It comes from within. It's a cultivated discipline, a mental fortress built brick by brick, moment by moment. A lifetime of resisting the urge to react, to explain, to justify. We live in a world that sells us a counterfeit version of confidence, a version that involves shouting your opinions, broadcasting your every emotion, and begging for likes. It's a world that mistakes noise for strength and vulnerability for authenticity. It encourages us to put our insecurities on full display, to wear our desperation on our sleeves. But this man, he's a living testament to a different kind of power, a power that understands that the moment you reveal your hunger, you become food for others. The moment your fear shows, you become a target. The moment you need something, you give others leverage. His secret, I believe, is that he appears to need nothing at all. He doesn't need your validation. He doesn't need your approval. He doesn't need your attention. And that's exactly why everyone in this room is subconsciously trying to get it. They're drawn to the mystery. They're captivated by the question of what lies beneath that impenetrable calm. The silence that surrounds him is a shield, yes, but it's also a weapon. It forces others to fill the void, to speak too much, to reveal too much. They're so desperate to understand him, to break through his composure, that they unintentionally lay their own cards on the table. Their insecurities, their desperation, their need to be seen. It all spills out in a torrent of nervous chatter. And he just stands there, watching, absorbing, and learning. He doesn't say a word, and yet he's winning the entire game without even playing. This is not about arrogance. This is about a profound, almost terrifying self-awareness. He knows that his greatest strength lies not in what he says, but in what he withholds. It's a power that whispers instead of shouts, that waits instead of rushes, that observes instead of reacts. It's a power that understands that the world moves towards mystery and away from the predictable. I'm watching the man, and I'm starting to feel it, this strange blend of awe and fear. A part of me wants to run, to get away from the unnerving stillness, but a bigger part, a deeper part, wants to understand. I want to know how he built that fortress, how he trained himself to be so unreadable. It's a lesson in itself, just to be in his presence. The lesson that the most powerful thing you can do in a world that demands a reaction to everything is to give it nothing at all. To be so confident in your own reality that you don't need to perform for theirs. To hold the ultimate high ground, not by climbing a mountain, but by simply standing still. The man in the periphery is not just nonchalant. He is a master of psychological warfare. He is the quiet storm, the eye of the hurricane. He doesn't chase. He doesn't plead. He doesn't perform. He just is. And in a world filled with constant noise, that quiet presence is the most powerful statement of all. That night, alone in my apartment, the image of that man wouldn't leave me. His stillness felt like a mirror, reflecting back all the frantic, desperate energy I'd spent my life projecting. The constant need to be seen, to be heard, to be liked. It was exhausting. And for what? For a fleeting moment of validation that evaporated as soon as the next person walked into the room. I felt a cold dread creep over me. What if all this time I'd been playing the wrong game? What if I'd been chasing the mirage of confidence, the kind that's built on flimsy public approval and not the real thing? I started to see the world differently, as if a curtain had been pulled back. I saw my friends posting their perfect lives on Instagram, each photo a desperate plea for validation, a carefully curated lie. I saw my colleagues vying for attention in meetings, their voices rising with every point they tried to make, each one a little bit louder than the last. I saw the news channels, screaming headlines, pundits yelling over each other, all of them desperate to dominate the noise. It wasn't confidence I was seeing. It was a mass performance of insecurity, a world full of people trying to prove they matter, because deep down, they're terrified they don't. We've been sold a lie that visibility equals value, that the person who is the loudest, the most reactive, the most emotionally expressive is the most powerful. But I now suspected that was the ultimate deception. The man in the room was a stark contrast to this modern malaise. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He simply existed in his own truth, and his lack of performance was his greatest asset. He wasn't participating in the race for attention, so he couldn't lose. He wasn't begging for validation, so he couldn't be rejected. He had opted out of the game entirely, and in doing so, he had become the most sought-after player. This was not about arrogance. It was about an immense, quiet self-respect. He had nothing to prove to anyone, because he had already proven everything to himself. And that, I realized, was a terrifying and beautiful thing. This modern world is a constant test. It wants to see if you can be triggered, if you can be baited, if you can be pulled into the drama. It's a psychological battlefield, and most of us walk onto it completely disarmed, our emotions on full display. We react to every insult, every slight, every piece of gossip. We rush to defend ourselves, to explain ourselves, to justify our every move. And with every reaction, we give away a piece of our power. We give the world a playbook for how to manipulate us. The man in the room had no playbook. He was an unwritten chapter, a mystery. And what you can't read, you can't control. I started to think about my own life, my own insecurities. How many times had I rushed to fill an awkward silence with a nervous laugh? How many times had I overshared just to feel connected? How many times had I defended myself from a perceived slight that wasn't even worth my energy? Each time, I was handing over a piece of my sovereignty. I was telling the world, I need you to tell me I'm okay. The man in the room didn't need that reassurance. He was okay, and it was so evident in his stillness that it made others feel unsettled. They wanted to know why he wasn't playing by the rules, why he wasn't reacting to their frantic energy. His calm was a challenge, a question mark they couldn't ignore. It's a terrifying thought to confront, that the very things we've been taught, our strengths, openness, emotional transparency, constant engagement, might actually be our biggest vulnerabilities. That the most confident people aren't the ones who are loudest, but the ones who can sit in silence, unshaken, while the world screams around them. The nonchalant man isn't cold or unfeeling. He's simply a master of his inner world. He understands that an emotion is not a command, it's a suggestion, and he's trained himself to hear the suggestion, to acknowledge it, and then to choose his response with a deliberate, calculated pause. He doesn't act from a place of reaction, but from a place of strategy. He has already decided what matters, and everything else is just noise. The dread I felt in that room began to transform into a strange kind of hope. The hope that I could learn to cultivate that same stillness. The hope that I could learn to be less of a reaction and more of a response. That I could stop giving away my power in tiny emotional increments. It would be a long, difficult journey. It would mean confronting the deepest parts of my insecurity, the parts that crave approval and attention. It would mean learning to be comfortable with silence, with misunderstanding, with not being liked. But the alternative seemed far worse. To continue living a life where my sense of self was dependent on the validation of others. The man I'd seen wasn't living that life. He was a force, an unmovable object in a world of constant motion. And for the first time, I wanted to be like him. The dread I felt that night wasn't just a personal revelation. It was a ghost from history, whispering to me. It was the spirit of a Florentine statesman, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli. He understood the game of power better than anyone, and he wrote about it in a book so controversial, so chillingly pragmatic, that it's been studied and feared for centuries. The Prince. I always thought of Machiavelli as cold, ruthless, a schemer who advocated for pure cruelty. But as I reconsidered the man in the room, I started to see something else entirely. Machiavelli didn't just teach the prince how to be feared. He taught him how to seem. He taught him the weapon of appearances. Machiavelli wrote that it is better for a ruler to be feared than loved, if he cannot be both. But he also taught that a prince must avoid being hated, for hatred makes him a target. And how does one inspire fear without inspiring hatred? By being unreadable, by appearing to be in complete control, even when chaos surrounds you. Because once others see your desperation, once they see your need, they can use it as a leash. They can manipulate you, exploit your weakness, and eventually dominate you. But when they see nothing, when your eyes reveal no need, your face no urgency, your words no panic, they are left disarmed. They cannot grasp you, and what cannot be grasped becomes dangerous. The man in the room was a living embodiment of this Machiavellian principle. He wasn't overtly threatening. He wasn't loud or aggressive. He didn't have to be. His power was built on a foundation of unshakable calm, and that calm was a weapon. It created an energy field around him that others were afraid to breach. They couldn't bait him. They couldn't rattle him. They couldn't get a rise out of him. And that terrified them more than any shouted threat ever could. It was like trying to fight a ghost. You swing, you yell, you flail, but you hit nothing but air. And in the end, you're the one who looks pathetic, exhausted, and out of control. Machiavelli's lesson wasn't about being a monster. It was about being a master of your own emotions, a master of perception. He understood that in the grand theater of life, everyone is performing. The king, the peasant, the lover, the enemy, and the one who performs best is the one who understands that appearances are everything. The nonchalant man holds his power in silence. He speaks with an economy of words, each one carrying the weight of a stone, dropping into a still pond. He acts with calculation, not with haste. He does not rush to fill the air with noise, nor does he display the full range of his emotions. He is disciplined. He is deliberate, while others react to every slight, every rumor, every shift of the wind. He remains still. Not because he is passive, but because he is watching, judging, waiting. There is a profound strength in making others uncertain, in becoming the question that lingers in their mind. Why doesn't he react? Why doesn't he chase? Why doesn't he care? Their confusion becomes his advantage, their curiosity, his control. The moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop reaching, you begin to draw others in. The world, like a moth to a flame, moves toward mystery. It avoids the predictable and clings to the unknown. Machiavelli never advocated for emotional transparency. He wrote that a ruler must know how to hide his intentions. Nonchalance is the perfect disguise. It is not an absence of emotion, but the mastery of emotion. It is showing nothing while feeling everything, thinking deeply while appearing detached, holding the upper hand while pretending not to notice. When you are nonchalant, you dictate the emotional climate. Others must guess how you feel. They must guess what you want. You offer no tells, no obvious signs, no openings. They play your game while believing they are playing their own. And by the time they realize it, they've already revealed themselves. Their cards are on the table. Yours remain hidden. This is psychological warfare. The one who seems to need nothing is often the one who controls everything. Because what you appear to lack, others rush to provide. What you pretend not to want, others try to give. Your detachment creates pursuit. Your silence creates tension. Your calm creates authority. This calm is not natural. It is trained. It is a lesson passed down from history's most disciplined minds, from Machiavelli himself. The prince must learn to appear composed even when chaos surrounds him. And in the modern world, the nonchalant man is the new prince. This isn't about being cold. It's about being strategic. The core of this power, this unsettling nonchalance, is the strategic pause. It's the moment between an event and your reaction, that tiny microscopic sliver of time where you decide to do nothing. Most people don't even know this moment exists. They are slaves to their instincts, lurching from one impulse to the next. Someone says something offensive, and they immediately fire back a retort. A frustrating situation arises, and they rush to complain. An opportunity presents itself, and they leap at it with a desperate energy that reeks of scarcity. They are predictable, because they are predictable to themselves. They are a car without brakes, constantly careening forward. The nonchalant man, by contrast, has built a brake system. He has taught himself to pause. He has built a psychological distance between his emotions and his expressions. An emotion is a feeling. A feeling is not a command. You feel anger, but you don't have to show it. You feel desire, but you don't have to chase it. You feel fear, but you don't have to flinch. The strategic pause is the moment you reclaim your power from the tyranny of your own biology. It's the split-second decision to observe your feeling without letting it own you. It's the difference between a knee-jerk reaction and a deliberate response. I've been on the receiving end of this. I once gave a presentation, my heart pounding, my voice trembling with nerves. The room was full of people, and I was desperate for their approval. After I finished, everyone gave polite, expected applause, except for one man. He didn't clap. He just sat there, his expression unreadable, his hands resting calmly in his lap. My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, to ask him what was wrong, to demand his validation. But he said nothing. He simply sat with the silence, letting my nervous energy hang in the air like a thick fog. It was terrifying. He didn't have to say a word. His silence, his lack of reaction, spoke volumes. It made me question my entire performance. Was it bad? Was I a fool? What was he thinking? His calm became my chaos. His stillness became my uncertainty. He held all the power in that moment, not because he was being rude, but because he was refusing to play the game I desperately needed him to play. This is the power of withholding. Every time you withhold an emotional response, you take ownership of yourself. Every time you let someone else reveal their motives while you remain still, you gain insight. And insight is the currency of advantage. Others may call it cold. They may call it distant. But the nonchalant man does not flinch at misunderstanding. He is not here to be liked. He is here to win. And winning, in the Machiavellian sense, is not about having more. It's about outlasting, outmaneuvering, outwitting. Do not mistake nonchalance for passivity. It is not weakness. It is patience with teeth, a kind of focused detachment that only the disciplined can hold. It says, I am not threatened by what you do. I am not compelled to prove anything. I am not afraid to let silence speak for me. The strategic pause is a battlefield. It's a moment of internal war. Your ego screams at you to react, to defend yourself, to prove your worth. But your deeper, wiser self knows that to react is to lose. The truly powerful don't need to prove anything. They just exist. They don't jump into every argument. They don't chase every opportunity. They don't offer their opinion unless it's worth more than the silence it replaces. And in a world addicted to noise, to resistance, to drama, the man who refuses to be shaken becomes impossible to ignore. He becomes the quiet eye of the storm, the one who reveals nothing, yet sees everything. He is the ghost in the room full of noise, and in the end, the one who says the least often commands the most. This power is not natural. It must be forged through 1,000 small acts of self-denial. Every time you bite your tongue, every time you resist the urge to explain, every time you choose stillness over chaos, you are building the foundation of your future power. The world will test your calm. It will insult you, dismiss you, misunderstand you. It will try to trigger you into reaction, into proving, into explaining. And in those moments, you will face an internal war, more brutal than any external conflict. The feeling of being misunderstood is a physical ache. Your stomach knots up, your jaw clenches, and a hot, searing wave of emotion crashes through you. Your instincts, honed over millions of years of evolution, scream at you to fight back, to defend your honor, to correct the record. It is a primal, terrifying urge. You feel the panic rising in your throat, the desperate need to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to not be judged. I remember a moment like this. A colleague, a man who loved to dominate conversations, publicly dismissed an idea I'd worked on for weeks. He didn't just disagree, he laughed. A short, dismissive bark that made the room feel small, and me feel even smaller. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to tear his argument apart, to expose his ignorance, to make him look as foolish as he'd made me feel. My hands balled into fists under the table. My breath hitched. This was the moment I could prove him wrong, the moment I could fight for my reputation, the moment I could finally show everyone how smart I was. But then, a flash of that man in the crowded room came to my mind. His stillness, his unblinking calm. He wouldn't have reacted. He would have absorbed the insult, held the tension, and let it hang in the air. This is the psychological battle you must fight every single day. Your ego is a relentless enemy. It craves validation, applause, and recognition. It hates being ignored. It hates being wrong. It wants to jump into every fight, to respond to every email, to correct every misconception. It tells you that to be silent is to be weak. It whispers that if you don't fight for respect, no one will give it to you. It's a powerful voice, and it can be terrifyingly convincing. You will feel the urge to break the silence. You will feel the pressure to fill the void, to prove your worth, to show you're not a coward, to explain yourself until you're hoarse. But remember, most people are ruled by this impulse. They act quickly, emotionally, loudly, and that noise is what buries them. That noise is what makes them predictable, vulnerable, replaceable. The real test is whether you can walk through it all, silent and unmoved, eyes forward, shoulders steady, intent focused. That's what makes you rare. That's what makes you remembered. Not the noise you make, but the calm you keep. Not the approval you chase, but the gravity you carry. The internal war is fought in the micro moments. When a text message makes you angry and you resist the urge to type a furious response. When someone cuts you off in traffic and you choose not to honk or yell. When you are ignored in a conversation and you don't frantically try to insert yourself. This is the training ground. This is where you forge the steel of your self-mastery. Every time you resist the impulse, you are telling your ego, I am not your slave. You are telling the world, I decide what matters. I decide what enters my world. I decide when I speak and when I do not. That is the root of confidence. Not loudness, not confrontation, but the refusal to be moved unless it's on your terms. It is a lonely fight. There will be moments when you want to react, when silence feels like weakness, when walking away feels like losing. But remember, true power isn't about winning every skirmish. It's about winning the long game. It's about outlasting, outmaneuvering, and outwitting. And you do that by not getting pulled into battles that don't serve you. You do it by letting others exhaust themselves while you conserve your energy. The nonchalant man has faced his fears in private. He has burned through weakness in silence. He has learned the difference between cheap reaction and rare strategic response, and that internal victory cannot be stolen. In that terrifying moment, facing the public ridicule of my colleague, I felt the battle raging inside me. My heart was a frantic drum, my mind a storm of vengeful thoughts. But then, in the eye of that storm, I saw a choice I'd never truly considered before. I could give him what he wanted. I could react. I could rise to the bait, engage in a petty argument, and waste my energy fighting on a stage he had set. Or I could do nothing. I could choose stillness. I could choose the strategic pause. The decision felt like a physical act, a sudden, terrifying quiet. I let the silence hang there, thick and heavy with his laugh. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct him. I didn't even look at him. My gaze remained steady, forward, as if his words hadn't even reached me. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every cell in my body screamed at me to speak, to fight. The silence felt like an eternity, a vast, echoing emptiness that I was forcing myself to inhabit. But in that emptiness, something incredible happened. My colleague's smirk faltered. The easy confidence in his eyes began to leak away, replaced by a flicker of confusion. The people around the table who had been ready to watch a show suddenly shifted uncomfortably. They looked at me, then at him, then back at me. I hadn't said a word, and yet I had completely changed the emotional climate of the room. This is the power of the unspoken decision. It's the moment you choose to be the rock in the river, instead of the leaf that gets swept away. You decide, with a conscious act of will, that you will not be moved, not by insult, not by pressure, not by the frantic energy of others. The moment I chose not to react, I took his weapon and turned it into my shield. His laugh, which was meant to humiliate me, now just felt desperate. He had put on a performance, but I had refused to be his audience. And without an audience, a performance looks pathetic. He had expected me to play a certain role, and by refusing, I had made him question his own. This is not a game of emotional manipulation. This is a game of emotional sovereignty. It's the act of saying, I am not for sale. My peace is not for rent. You cannot buy my reaction with your words. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect. You cannot beg for respect and expect to receive it. You cannot plead for attention and maintain dignity. The man who is truly confident, truly in control, appears to care less. Even when he cares deeply, he never shows it too soon. He understands that emotion is a currency, and he spends it with precision. He doesn't throw it away on every petty argument or social slight. He reserves it for the moments that truly matter. The stillness I adopted in that moment was not an act of arrogance. It was the product of a mind that no longer chases what does not matter. It was the reward for mastering my impulses, for breaking my dependency on attention, for realizing that urgency is often the enemy of power. The man who acts with urgency gives up the throne. The man who moves slowly, who speaks sparingly, who waits, he begins to rule. There is an energy in restraint, a deep, quiet power that comes from doing less, saying less, reacting less. Every time you withhold an emotional response, you take ownership of yourself. Every time you let someone else reveal their motives while you remain still, you gain insight. And insight is the currency of advantage. That day, I walked away from the meeting, not feeling defeated, but feeling liberated. I hadn't won an argument, but I had won a far more important battle, the battle with myself. I had resisted the urge to perform, the need to be seen, the frantic desire for validation. I had stood my ground, not with a shout, but with silence. And I understood then what that man in the crowded room already knew. Power is not built on domination. It is built on discipline. The man who does not flinch has spent years training that stillness. He has faced his fears in private. He has burned through weakness in silence. He has learned the difference between cheap reaction and rare, strategic response. And I had just taken my first step on that long, lonely, and incredibly powerful road. The greatest twist in this entire psychological drama is that your nonchalance isn't just a shield, it's a mirror. A terrifying, unforgiving mirror that reflects the desperation of others. The moment I chose not to react to my colleague's laugh, I didn't just win a battle. I completely unmasked him. He was so used to winning arguments by provoking a reaction that when I didn't give him one, his entire strategy collapsed. His forced laughter was no longer a sign of his superiority. It was a desperate plea for attention. His loud dismissal of my idea was not a statement of fact, but a cry for validation. He was trying to prove something to everyone in the room, and I had simply refused to be the tool he used for his proof. This is the most subtle yet powerful form of psychological judo. You use your opponent's own momentum against them. Most people wear their insecurities on their sleeve. They apologize before they speak. They laugh too loud. They overshare. They look for validation before they've earned it. But the nonchalant man moves through the world differently. He doesn't look around to see who's watching. He doesn't adjust his posture for approval. He stands as though he belongs because he has already decided that he does. This composure is unnerving. It threatens the frantic. It exposes the insecure, because while others are trying to prove something, he proves nothing. He simply is. And in a world addicted to attention, to resistance, to drama, the man who refuses to be shaken becomes impossible to ignore. Machiavelli wrote that it is not enough to be strong. One must appear strong. In the same way, it is not enough to feel composed. One must appear unmoved, because the appearance becomes reality. If others believe you are in control, they treat you as if you are. If they believe you are unaffected, they begin to question their own behavior. You control their perception by mastering your own expression. The silence you hold is a vacuum, and others, unable to stand the tension, rush to fill it with their own noise. They confess too much, try too hard, give away the game because they can't stand not knowing what you're thinking. That is the leverage nonchalance creates. You say nothing, and they reveal everything. Do not mistake this for a simple act of defiance. This is about control. Not of others, but of the space between you and others. If someone angers you and you remain calm, they lose control. If someone insults you and you remain unaffected, they become uncomfortable. If someone resists you and you do not chase, they question themselves. This is how power is built. Not through domination, but through discipline. The man who is nonchalant is not unkind. He is simply unshaken. His peace is not a strategy. It is a state of being earned through trials, through loss, through quiet battles with the self. And that inner victory cannot be stolen. This is the ultimate twist. While everyone else is fighting for the spotlight, you realize the real power is in the shadows. While others are shouting to be heard, your silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The moment you stop competing, you start winning. because you're no longer playing their game. You've created your own. And on your game board, stillness is a winning move, and silence is the ultimate weapon. So, what is the final lesson? What is the secret that the nonchalant man has uncovered? It's that power is quiet. Real power moves without sound. It does not explain itself. It does not seek applause. It does not chase validation. It simply exists, unmovable, deliberate, undeniable. The man who is nonchalant is not void of feeling. He is overflowing with discipline, and discipline is the highest form of self-respect. You do not become nonchalant by accident. You become nonchalant by design, with patience, with pain, with purpose. You train yourself to rise above your urges, to delay gratification, to remain composed, to observe without reacting. You learn to sit with the tension of being misunderstood, to hold your expression when someone misjudges you, to delay gratification when attention is within reach, to keep your plan to yourself, even when your ego wants applause. That is the cost of power, the price of poise, the discipline of nonchalance. The world will test your calm. It will try to trigger you into reaction, into proving, into explaining. But the test is not about how loud you can fight. The test is whether you can walk through it all, silent and unmoved, eyes forward, shoulders steady, intent focused. That's what makes you rare. That's what makes you remembered. Not the noise you make, but the calm you keep. Not the approval you chase, but the gravity you carry. You must learn to become the eye of the storm, the calm center in a world of chaos. Not by pretending to be above it, but by mastering your own reactions. Every time you resist the urge to speak, you gain control. Every time you walk away without responding, you grow in strength, because most people are slaves to emotion. They follow every impulse. But the nonchalant man rules over his instincts. That is why he commands the room, because he commands himself. This is the essence of true confidence. Not the loudness, not the performance, but the quiet certainty that you are enough. You do not owe anyone your emotion. You do not owe the world your vulnerability. To be nonchalant is to say, I decide what matters. I decide what enters my world. I decide when I speak and when I do not. That is the final, most profound lesson. It is the ability to hold tension without breaking, to hear insult without reacting, to feel pressure without rushing. And in a world that's constantly shouting to be heard, the one who says the least often commands the most. This is not about being cold. It's not about being apathetic. It's about being a master of your own domain. It's about cultivating a deep, quiet power that doesn't need to be announced. It's a Machiavellian lesson for the modern age, teaching you that the less you reveal, the more people imagine. The less you pursue, the more they chase. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry. True power is not loud. It is still. It is patient. It is deliberate. It is the unwavering calm that stands in the face of chaos. It's the strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you want, so you have nothing left to prove. This path is not easy. It will require you to fight a silent, internal war. But the reward is immeasurable, a sense of peace and control that no one can ever take from you.